Hi guys, my name is Laka Fakiki. I'm from Hallam, Melbourne, Australia, and I train out of Scammer Fight Gym in Narre under a good friend of mine, Clay Amatangi. And I've been in the BJJ game for the last probably nine and a half years, and it has really changed my life. What we're trying to do here is help out our community, our youth, who's literally playing up, not at home. So we want to, who's not loved as well. So we're putting something together to bring all these youth that we know that who we see that have potential in life, and we're here to to show that we do care about them, and there is a home for them. If they're feeling down, they'll go through hard times in life, and we're here. Doing jiu-jitsu helped me a lot in terms of, especially losing my father probably 5 years ago. I was really down. I went through depression. I just went downhill. Just ate myself out and became I drank so much heavily. So it was time to wake up, and obviously jiu-jitsu has helped me maintain that and got me back to where I'm at the moment, along with my faith. My parents are very well respected in the Cook Island community, as they were ministers for the Cook Island Christian Church. And going back, my dad was involved in a lot of youth work, and he helped out so many people during his time. And he was well respected through his church and also through his sports. So this is kind of something that we want to give back, and also share the jiu-jitsu to the youth who's going through tough times. We talk about mental health, and I'm a big believer in our churches, and this is the only way for me to give back, is to return the favor, because they have so much love for my parents. All we're asking here, guys, is just a little donation to help us out going. The money goes towards our mats. That's our mats and a bit of little things like that to help the youth that's coming through the system. So anything that you can give, we'll take it and we'll appreciate it. Thank you.
As you heard the bro, get behind this cause. Incorporating jiu-jitsu with our faith and trying to help the greater community. So, see you on the mats. Oos.
Greetings all. It's Brother George here for another Faith and Grace Ministries podcast. I hope everybody out there is doing well. Week, I've lost count of the weeks. Maybe someone can remind me of the lockdown here in Coronaville, also known as Melbourne, Victoria. But I hope everybody is keeping in the rules helping each other out. I know there's a lot of criticisms and all these sorts of things going on with Daniel Andrews and whatnot, but I'm sure it's not easy for him. But that's not what this show's about. We're going to continue on with our Islam series with a good friend of ours who's decided to join us again. I'm going to add him to the stream. Dr. Bernie Power. Dr. Bernie, how are you, Dr. Bernie?
All right, thanks. Great to see you all.
Oh, we can't hear you. Oh, yes. There's a bit of a delay there, but we can hear you.
Right. Okay. Would it be better if I had headphones and a microphone, mic?
Oh, it's synced now. It was out of sync. Now it's synced. So,
okay. Right. Good.
How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. Yep, I've been cycling around. I live in the western suburbs of Melbourne. Been cycling around and then discovered I don't actually have to wear a mask while I'm on my bike, but I do anyway, just to look and be socially responsible. So that's good.
Wow, you've been cycling for how long? Like, what's your regiment with that cycling?
I only use it for commuting, so just down to the shops and back, and yeah, no long distance stuff. Sometimes I'll cycle from here into the city and back when we're able to do that. But yeah, at the moment it's just around the local area.
Oh, awesome. And it's good, because I think fitness is another thing we need to get involved with as well. Keeping fit, and especially a man your age. I don't know how old you are, sir, but if a man your age, I'm not trying to say you're like old, but
I'm 67, so that's not too old.
Yeah, but it's good, good to see people of your age going out there and keeping active and going. Like, I'm sure, like, I only live maybe a 2-minute drive to the shops, but I'm driving there. You know what I mean? It's good. We should walk to the shops and maybe ride our bikes. It's good. But what's been happening since the last time you were on here? You shared a profound presentation last time you were on here, dealing with the Quran. What's been happening since then with you? Because I've been quite busy.
Been quite busy, yeah. So last week I was actually on Jay Smith's show in the United States. So Jay and I are old friends from a long time back. He studied at our college, did his doctorate through Melbourne School of Theology. We're one of the few places in the world where you can actually take a view of Islam which is not totally positive, and you're allowed to actually be critical of Islam at our college. And so he did his doctorate on with us, and so I've known him through that. And so he invited me onto his show, and we talked about some of the stuff we talked about 2 weeks ago, the different versions of the Quran, and I showed him actually I just picked up 2 new ones, just arrived yesterday. Where are they? Here on my desk somewhere. I've lost them. Here they are. 2 new ones just arrived yesterday from Jordan. Came by post. So taking my collection up to 25 different ones, different Qurans, so different Arabic Qurans. And with Jay, I went through some of those differences between the 2 most popular copies, the Hafs version and the Warsh version, and talked a little bit about how that arose. So,
and the Hafs version is the mainstream. Is that the Hafs version would be the? Is that the main version? Is that the one they tried to push? I think he was mentioning that. That's what the Egyptians were trying to push as the main Quran.
Yeah, so the Egyptians accepted it as the kind of the standard Quran. And if you go, like the Saudi embassy supplies these ones free, so you can write to them, and they'll always send you the Hafs version. They won't accept other kinds of versions. That's the one that they're trying to promote, and they're printing it in big numbers and handing it out free to people. So that's the one that they're supporting and endorsing.
Yeah, because from what I'm seeing, especially with the Christian apologists that deal with Islam, there seems to be quite a bit of, how can I say? There's a lot of talk about this. You know what I mean? I don't know. Would you say that the foundations of Islam are starting to be shaken, especially from a scholastic point of view?
Yeah. In fact, on Tuesday night, I was talking with a young Iranian guy who's become a Christian, and we were looking at the TV program with Jay Smith, and he said, "Oh, look, if I'd seen this stuff, 10 years ago, I would have become a Christian then." He only became a Christian last year. He said because he'd also been brought up with this concept that there's only one Quran, that it's never been changed, and then they would use that as a kind of thing. But the Christian Bible, that's being changed all the time, that kind of thing. He knows that's not true, but he wasn't aware of the first one about the Quran having a variety of versions. So that was big news for him.
Oh, that's awesome. And since doing that, because Dr. J. Smith's got he's quite well known amongst the circles of apologists dealing with Islam. You did the show last week. I've seen it. What's been the response? since
Yeah,
then.
so yeah, big response from all around the world. So I'm getting emails from the UK, from Indonesia, from India, from the US, New Zealand. People have seen it and just responding to it and wanting some more information. So that's been good.
Oh, praise the Lord. And you know what? It's you've been at this for how long? Decades, probably as long as I've been alive. And
Probably more than, yeah. So Jay and I were talking about that. I've been working in this field for about 40 years. So, yeah.
Wow. You know what? And God bless your work. And, you know, I appreciate you taking the time out to come and speak to us here at Faith and Grace Ministries. You know, and definitely looking forward to today. Today's topic. So what we're going to do, I'm going to leave the floor to you. You know, we know what today's topic is going to be is who is Muhammad, but yeah, the floor is yours, good sir.
Okay, yeah. Feel free to jump in with a question anytime.
Sure.
So I will show a PowerPoint on this. Let me see if I can. Let's go back to that. Okay.
Did you want to share your screen or
share my screen? Yep, I'll share my screen. Here it is in slideshow from beginning. Okay. Now, oops, going back. Okay, can you see that?
not yet. I think you got to share the screen from.
Oh, I thought I had.
I haven't seen it yet.
Let's try if I can see if I can put that one to the side. Okay. All right. So I've clicked there, share screen and share. Okay. And I can see.
It hasn't come up yet.
Hasn't come up. Oh dear.
No.
All right.
Sorry, guys. It's technical.
Yep. Yeah. So it's telling me share. Okay, application window. Okay, so that's the thing. I need to go into application window and choose the one that I'm going to share.
Yeah, here we go.
Coming up now. Okay, all right.
I guarantee you, by the end of this Islamic series with Dr. Bernie Power, we will definitely have the technical issues. So,
well, sorted out. Yeah, sure.
So here we go.
All right. Okay, so the topic, it's interesting. I've debated this topic a couple of times, and the question that has always been is who is Muhammad, and the one that George put forward was who was Muhammad, and I think this shows an important difference. Is there's actually two Muhammads. There's the Muhammad of history, the one that we read about in all the ancient texts, and there's the Muhammad of faith, in that the one that Muslims believe and follow. And they're really quite different. And often,
if I could think, I'm glad you caught that when I worded the topic, when I worded the thing, I thought it was important to have was, because I don't think most people knew who he was. Do you know what I mean? And it's not me trying to be disrespectful or whatnot, but I just, you know, we have to deal with the facts. And that's why I worded it the way they did. And I'm glad you saw it that way. And you know, you're a very smart man. And yeah, that's the reason. And I'm glad you actually even thought about doing it like that. But yeah, let me interrupt. But
yeah. So it's important, and the stuff that I'll use today all comes from Islamic sources. So I've actually gone back. I'm an academic. I mentioned later I write books on things and papers and give lectures. So all of our stuff has to be referenced. I can't just say, oh, Muhammad did this or Muhammad said that. I have to give a specific place. So when we go to the Quran, you would think this is the normal place. This is the earliest Islamic document. But it's actually a very poor source of Muhammad's life. It doesn't have any, in general, doesn't have names and places and dates and details. In fact, Muhammad is mentioned only 4 times in the whole Quran. So imagine that. You've got this book here, which is 6,000 plus verses, and Muhammad's only named 4 times. Jesus, by contrast, is named 25 times. Moses 137 times. But Muhammad only 4 times by name. Mecca is only mentioned once in there. I've got twice, but I think it's actually only once. compared to, say, in the Bible, Jerusalem over 850 times. So we get a contrast between that. There's no dates in the Quran. It doesn't give you, in the Bible it says, in the year that King Uzziah died or when Augustus was the emperor. We can date those. The Quran lacks any of those kind of details. So if we want to find out about the life of Muhammad, we have to go to other places. The Quran doesn't mention his mother or father, any of his wives. It doesn't mention any of the details of his life. To get those, we go to another book which was called the Seerah, or biography of Muhammad. It was written by a man called Ibn Ishaq he died in 767. Notice this is 140 plus years after Muhammad died. So it's writing a century and a half later on. But we don't actually have that book. We have a recension or an edition written by another man who wrote 70 years later, a man called Ibn Hisham. And that's the document that we read. It's his redaction. Another source that we would use would be the Hadith collections, and the two are here by al-Bukhari and Muslim. These were written, and you can see the dates there. Al-Bukhari completed his work 214 years after Muhammad died, and Sahih Muslim 242 years after Muhammad died. And then the last one would be the history of At-Tabari. This is probably the most important one. But notice again the date, 300 years after Muhammad died. So we're thinking the equivalent that I would use is if we were to write the story of Captain Cook now without any previous written records, that's what these men did. It was all passed on by oral records. So there's question marks that people have about that. How accurate could the history be written so late with so few, without any kind of previous written records to draw upon?
And if I could ask Dr. Bernie, what with the early Christian writings, what would we say the earliest dates of, say, Paul's letters from Christ's death to maybe, I think Paul's letters are some of the earliest writings?
Exactly, yeah. So they would have been written within 30 years of, or even 25 years. So the earliest ones would be Paul's epistles, so written in the 50s, and Jesus died in about 30 AD. So 20 to 25, 30 years later.
Compared to 130,
200, 253. Yeah. Yeah, and even like within the first century, or the second century, the first century after Christ, within that period, we have a whole lot of other writings of the early church fathers who, some of them knew people who were eyewitnesses with Jesus. So they're all written from eyewitness reports or people who were the companions of eyewitnesses. But I'm going to assume all of these are correct. I'm not doing any kind of source criticism on these books today.
Yeah.
So I'll just put these things up there. I've actually written 3 books that feature Muhammad. There they are there. So Jesus and Muhammad was my first book, and then my doctoral thesis was came into 2 books on challenging Islamic traditions and engaging Islamic traditions. And you'll see the middle one, I've actually written a fair bit of positive stuff about the life of Muhammad. I've got 25 pages there on his positive things that took place in his life, 10 pages on his positive depictions of women. So it's not all negative, because I want to have a balanced view. Yeah,
and we can buy these books on your website?
Yeah, you can buy them on Amazon. They're around. They're all available. So any of the normal kind of online places, or you can drop me a line and I can send them to people.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I should point out my intention here is not to insult or upset anyone. I just want to put the information out there. When I have debated on this, I get death threats and people say all kinds of negative things about me. But the intention is not to cause people problems, and I apologize in advance when I fail in that, because people will often misunderstand what I'm trying to say. So I think that's important, that the intention there is to put information out there, and people just need to understand that, you know, sometimes they will not feel that they'll feel uncomfortable with hearing some of the things that I'm talking about, particularly for Muslims. So let's go through the history. So Muhammad's early life, according to these sources, he was born in about 570 AD in the city of Mecca. His father's name was Abdullah, and notice the name here. This is the name Abd Allah, the slave of Allah. So Allah is a kind of a pre-Islamic name for God. It's the one that the Jews and the Christians were also using. And his father actually died before Muhammad was born. He was a trader, and he went off on a trip, leaving Muhammad's mother Amina behind. She was pregnant, and the father died on the trip. So Muhammad never met his father. Muhammad was brought up by his mother in those early years, and she actually died when he was 6 years old. So he became an orphan from a very young age. And he was brought up by an uncle, Abu Talib. A little time in the middle, he was brought up by his grandfather, who also died. So there was a lot of tragedy in Muhammad's early life. In his childhood, he worked as a shepherd out in the hills around Mecca, looking after goats and camels. And later, he became a trader. So the Arabs were very good as middlemen, taking goods from one place to another and selling it. And so Muhammad actually had a good reputation in town. His nickname was El Amin, which means the faithful one, because people saw him as a person with a lot of honesty and integrity. He'd grown up in a pretty poor family. His prospects for marriage weren't very good. In fact, he'd wanted to marry his cousin, but his uncle turned him down and married her off to someone who was wealthier than Muhammad. So there was no problem with his character, but there was a problem with his economic situation. And you need to pay a price to get married, and Muhammad obviously didn't have the means to do that. But at age 25, he was proposed to by an older woman, and not just any woman. This lady's name was Khadija. She was 40 years old, so she was 15 years older than him. So the equivalent to the difference between a mother and a son in those age. Remember, he'd lost his mother. And so this older woman comes to him, and she proposes marriage to him. Khadija was actually his boss. She was the one who ran the trading company that he worked, the international trading company, and they would take goods from the Arabian Peninsula up to Damascus, sell them in the markets in Damascus, and then buy goods in Damascus and come back to Arabia and then sell them there. And Muhammad did really well with this. He was quite good as a salesman, and he earned a lot of money for her in the company. And so she proposed marriage to him, and he accepted that. And that meant that no longer did he have to work for a living. He now had free time, he had money, leisure, and he actually spent that time on a spiritual quest. At this period, the Arabs were pagans. They were idol worshippers. The Kaaba in the center of Mecca, which is still there, that black box that you see in the middle of Mecca, was there at that time, and it housed 360 idols in and around it. It was a bit like the Greek pantheon, where everybody brought along their gods, and so people would come from miles around to worship at the Kaaba in Mecca, and they would maybe sacrifice to one god who was famous for maybe helping their crops grow, and then they'd go to another one who would be helpful for sickness, and another one who would be helpful for if your wife wasn't having any children. And so they would do this, and this was the kind of the commerce of the town. People would come in and offer their sacrifices, contribute to the all the stalls and the economic situation of the town, and that was what the town was based on. It was known as a shrine town. And Muhammad wasn't quite so sure about this. He would spend a month each year, the month of Ramadan, going up to a cave outside of Mecca called Mount Hira. And it was a pagan custom called Tahanath. It was a bit like having a spiritual retreat. And he would go there for this month each year, take along food, and he would fast and pray and be there in this cave, wanting to connect with God. He wasn't. There were questions being asked about all the different gods and idols that they had down there in Mecca. Well, one night he was, when he was 40 years old, so he'd been doing this for maybe 15 years, he had a dream. He fell asleep, and in his dream, a being appeared to him and showed him a piece of cloth which had some writing on it. And the being said to him, the Arabic word was Iqra, which means read or recite. And Muhammad's response was Ma Aqra. And this has got two meanings in Arabic. It could either mean I can't read, because Muhammad was illiterate. There weren't any schools in Mecca that he could go through. Or it could mean, what shall I read? Ma Aqra can have either of those meanings. It's an ambiguous statement. But the being then grabbed him and squeezed him so tightly, he said he thought he was going to die, and then said to him again, Iqra, read. And he said the same thing, Ma Aqra, either I can't read or what shall I read? Now, it's a bit funny, this, because he'd been shown some material, some brocade with writing on it. It was pretty obvious what he should read. So it probably meant that he couldn't read. But why would the being squeeze him and tell him to do something that he couldn't do? And then let him go and said, read a third time. And he said, I can't read, and grabbed him again. And he said, I thought I was going to die. He was suffocating with this being in this dream. And then the being says, okay, the being starts reading the passage which is written on the material. It says, Iqra bi ism rabbak, read or recite in the name of your Lord. And that's Surah 96, the first verse of the Quran that was revealed. And then Muhammad woke up from this, and it was kind of a scary nightmare that he'd had. He thought he was going to die. This being had read something to him, and then told him what it was. But the words of it were cycling around in his head. He kind of memorized them because they'd been burned into his memory. Well, Muhammad's response to this was very interesting, in that he ran out of town. Sorry, I've skipped a few trades there. Okay, this was the Kaaba with the different idols around it. This was a cartoon that was made about the life of Muhammad. You can see this one on the internet. And this is what happened to him when he was there in the cave. The being says to him, and he didn't know who this being was, by the way. It just appeared to him in the cave. It says, read in the name of your Lord who created humanity from a clot. Read, and your Lord is the most generous, who is taught by the pen. He taught humanity what he did not know. And so he wakes up from this nightmare, and he's not sure how to respond to it. So the records tell us that he ran down to town, ran down screaming to his wife, to Khadija, saying, cover me, cover me. And so she wrapped him up in a blanket, and he lay there shivering for some time. She didn't know. He told her what had happened. She didn't know. So she went off to visit her cousin, a man named Waraka bin Nawfal, who was a Christian, and told him what had happened. And Waraka said, well, this actually happened to Moses. When he was on a mountain, he also met with an angel. And so Muhammad was a bit scared that this had been a demon that had come and tried to possess him, because the demons, the jinn, live in caves. And Khadija comes back and tells Muhammad this, and then Waraka dies 3 days later. So the source of his information about this is now gone. Now, Muhammad's in a difficult situation. He's had this dream. He thought it was a demon. He's been told it was an angel. And he becomes a bit depressed with this, because no revelations come for another 3 years. He's left in silence. And so he actually goes to commit suicide. When he's despairing about this, Khadija says to him, I think your Lord must have come to hate you because he hasn't given you another revelation. And Muhammad said, there was no one of God's creation more hateful to me than a poet or a madman, and I could not bear to look at either of them. The verses that the being had recited to him was in a poetry form, with a kind of a rhyming system, which you can read in Arabic. But they also believed that poets were people who'd been possessed by a spirit or a jinn, or perhaps a demon, and maybe they'd gone mad. The word for crazy in Arabic is majnoon, which is a person who's got a jinn in them. And so Muhammad says, I said to myself, your humble servant is either a poet or a madman, but the Quraysh, that is his tribe, shall never say this of me. I'll take myself to a mountain crag, throw myself down and kill myself and find relief in that way. And he said he went out intending to do that. So poor Muhammad is so upset by this thing that's happened to him, he's decided that he's going to go and commit suicide. And it says several times he became so sad that he decided to throw himself from the tops of high mountains. So poor Muhammad's going through this really difficult thing, this thing that happened to him, this really bad dream, and the fact that he hasn't had any further revelations may have made him get to the point of wanting to kill himself. Well, he keeps this, and then the revelations start coming to him a little bit more. And so he's told that he needs to go and warn his family and his nearest relations that there is a judgment coming, and that people that the people need to turn away from the sins that they've been involved in. So he's threatened with violence if he doesn't go and preach. So initially he told only his family, his close family and friends about it. And one day it's reported that these words, warn your family and your nearest relations, came down to the apostle. This is a verse in the Quran. And he came to me and he said to Ali, who was his cousin, who had become a Muslim, he said, God has ordered me to warn my family, my nearest relations, and the task is beyond my strength. I know that when I made this message known to them, I should meet with great unpleasantness. So I kept silence until Gabriel came to me and told me if I did not do what I was ordered, my Lord would punish me. So Muhammad's got these stories, these things that are circulating around in his mind. He believes that they're revelations from Allah. He doesn't want to tell them to his family, but Gabriel, who's now identified himself as the angel Gabriel, says, if you don't do this, then Allah will punish you. And so he does. He goes out and he starts to speak to people about this dream that he's had, these revelations that he's been having.
Do you think, sorry if I could interject. So this is how many years after his initial confrontation? With the being?
So this is about 3 years. So from the period, so he receives the first revelation in about 610 AD, and about 613 he starts to publicly preach. He'd been talking about it privately with friends and relatives. So Khadija, his wife, was the first one who accepted it and said, I believe that you're a prophet, that Allah is going to speak to you and give a message to his people. The second one was his young cousin Ali, who was only 10 years old at that time. And then they had some other close family friends who he talked to who also decided that they would accept him as a prophet.
Do you think, and I just wanted to ask a question, do you think it's possible, because obviously they went to Khadija's cousin who was a Christian, he knew the things of the Bible, and then during this time they possibly could have been getting some more information about the Bible. They finally learned about Gabriel, because remember, he had no idea who it was, and then he started maybe piecing all these things and using the Bible to confirm it. Do you know what I mean? Do you get what I'm saying? And then
exactly, yeah. And that actually was the accusation from people, because he went out and he started to preach in the streets. So he was telling people, and his message was, turn away from idols and turn to Allah, who is the one true God. Allah, as I mentioned before, was known by the Arabs. He was the high God of the Arabs. So they had all of these different little deities, the idols that they worshipped. but they believed that behind them was, or above all of them, was Allah, who was the creator, and he created all of these other gods, and they were the ones that they were relating to. So it's a bit like, you know, having a patron saint or something like that. That's the kind of concept that people had at that time. But the Meccans also said, where is Muhammad getting this stuff from? And they noticed that he would spend a lot of time at the stall of a Christian slave, and the Arabs at this time practiced slavery quite commonly, whose name was Jabr. And they said he spends a lot of time at the stall of Jabr. He's obviously hearing the stories from him and coming out and preaching these stories. So they said that the earliest hearers believed that he was getting these stories from other sources, not just from the revelation. He goes out and starts telling the people what he's seen and what he's heard, but the message doesn't go down well. There were good economic reasons for this. He was telling the people to turn away from idols, and they said, but the idols are actually what brings the commerce into our city. That's the source of our income. If we get rid of them, no one will come here and all of our businesses will die. He tells them to worship only Allah, the high God of the high God of the Arabs. As he preached this message, he preached this for 12 years. The result gained only 200 followers. Mecca's population was about 30,000, they estimate. So less than 1% of the people decided to follow him. It wasn't a popular message. A contrast that maybe with the Jesus response when he started preaching, it says huge crowds followed him. So there were a lot of people who were following and listening to Jesus. Muhammad was very much a minority voice in the community, even though he was well respected and he came from a well-placed family. He was married to Khadija, who was the richest woman in the city, a well-respected trader. His message isn't getting much traction amongst them. And in fact, he received persecution. So people started making jokes about him. One time when he was down bowing at the Kaaba, someone tipped a bucket of sheep entrails on his back. People called him mad. They said he'd been possessed by a demon. They called him a liar. They called him a fabricator, that he was just making stories up. And so things were very difficult for him. But it was actually worse for his followers. Some of he picked up amongst his followers, a lot of them were from the slave group within there, and they were persecuted badly. One was killed, others were beaten up and tortured. So it wasn't a very easy time for him. It was really quite difficult for Muhammad and for the followers that he had. But things actually changed in 621 AD. So he's now been preaching this message for 12 years in the city of Mecca, not getting much of a response. And he's been a very peaceful preacher throughout this time. But then in 621 AD, he gets an invitation from a delegation who've come down from Medina. Medina, at that time, its name was Yathrib. And about 300 kilometers to the north, people came down to Mecca for the worship and for the trade, and they came to Muhammad and they said, we would like you to come to our city and to be our prophet. Now, Medina at that time had some great divisions. It had 2 Arab tribes and 3 Jewish tribes, and they were often fighting with each other. And they said, we need someone who's going to bring us together. Will you come up there and be our leader? And he said, I will, on condition that you will be willing to protect me. That is, to take up arms to protect me. Because he's a bit tired of all this opposition that he's receiving in Mecca. In fact, there was a death threat, an attempt on his life just before he left. And so he did. He accepts their invitation, and in the hijrah, or the immigration, Muhammad with the 200 people who decided to follow Islam fled from Mecca up to Medina. In small groups, they went up there and they established life there. Now things change in Mecca, in Medina. Whereas in Mecca he'd been a peaceful preacher, he now receives a revelation which permits him to engage in violence. So this new revelation, it meant that he could use military means to wreak vengeance on the Meccans, and also to gain wealth and to spread Islam. So by leaving Mecca, he'd left behind his business. Khadija had come with him. Actually, Khadija had died by this time, and he'd married another woman, and she had come with him. So their assets and job opportunities were left behind in Mecca, and the 200 arrived in town with no way of supporting themselves. The Arabs at this time were good at raiding each other, attacking each other's caravans, invading villages and taking the wealth and taking slaves away from those villages. And so Muhammad actually did that himself. So he starts off small, and I'll go through how that changed over time. But now he's got military capabilities. The people of the town are behind him. He's got political power, and he uses them for these attacks, which are called Ghazwa, which is the ones that he led himself, 28 of those that he led himself over the remaining 10 years of his life, and 50 other ones called a Sariya, which he sent out other people to do.
That's interesting. That's interesting because I've heard on numerous occasions from Muslims that Islam is the religion of peace. You know,
Yeah.
this is not sounding very peaceful.
No, not at all. And like to be fair, the other Arabs were also doing the same thing. It was a well-known way of getting hold of assets, that you would attack a caravan or raid a village, and you would take their gold and silver and camels and goats and take people as slaves. And Muhammad, they were doing all of this. He was basically following the pattern that the Arabs would have been involved in.
So what I'm trying to get at is, obviously Muhammad probably didn't promote Islam as the religion of peace. Do you think this could be a commentary from like imams, like well down the track? Do you know what I mean? Because we're not seeing that in the history of Islam.
Yeah, it's interesting. The whole idea of Islam is a religion of peace actually didn't come into the public parlance until after 9/11. Prior to that, if you read, and I read scholars from last century, and they are quite openly talking about Muhammad's military exploits and also the history of Islamic violence. But around 9/11, then the narrative changes, and the word that's out there is Islam is a religion of peace. These terrorist attacks are not related to Islam. They're contrary to the teaching of Islam. They're contrary to the history of Islam. But that's not actually what you find prior to that period.
Almost sounds like a PR campaign. After 9/11.
Totally. Yeah. It very much, and it got picked up. Even George Bush said he said that Islam is a religion that preaches peace. It was a statement he made after 9/11. He'd obviously been advised to make that statement by people. Yeah.
Anything for the votes. Huh?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but the chronology was an attack every 6 weeks on average in these last 10 years of Muhammad's life. And then Muhammad went on and died at age 62 or 63, and he's buried in Medina. But I'll go back through his life and just pick out some of the themes that were there. So that's a bit of an overview of his life. The reason that Muhammad is important is that people are told in the Quran, you have a good example in Muhammad's messenger. He presented himself as the model to follow. He said, by Allah, I fear Allah more than you do, and I am more obedient to him than you. So if you want to see the best example of a person who follows Allah, you need to look at Muhammad. He said, whoever does not follow my tradition in religion, and the word used here is sunnah, which means his example, is not from me. And another time he says, what is wrong with such people as refrain from doing a thing that I do? by Allah, I know Allah better than they, and I am more afraid of him than they. So he said he had a special relationship with Allah, and because of that, he was able to follow Allah better than anyone else, and so he was the model that was to be looked at.
It's almost sounding like the Christ, like Christ, do as I do, and Paul
Yes,
said,
exactly.
do as I. So it's This
Mhm.
so in if I can ask the question, so if I'm going to be a Muslim, I must follow not what Allah says, but what Muhammad does.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
And
okay.
increasingly, as the Quran develops, we see a movement away from just being obedient to Allah, but also to be obedient to Allah and His apostle. So the two are connected, kind of very closely. So you can't kind of separate obedience to Allah to obedience to the Prophet. Now, so the thing that Muslims would present is that Muhammad is the best model for humanity. I don't believe that. And I mentioned that I've been studying Islam for over 40 years, and Muslims will often say to me, you know so much about Islam, why haven't you become a Muslim? And I'll say, well, have a listen to, I'll give you some reasons why that. And for the rest of the talk, I'll explain the reasons why I haven't decided to become a Muslim based on the information that I have. Muhammad claimed also to be the universal prophet. He said that he'd been sent to not only to his own nation, but to all of mankind, all of humanity, and that the earth belongs to Allah and to his apostle. So he not only claims that he's got authority to teach, but also authority to rule, that the dominion of the world belongs to Allah and to his apostle, and that Allah has entrusted all the people of the earth to him. So he claims this preeminent position amongst all of humanity as the person to whom the world belongs and to whom all people need to pledge loyalty.
And if I could just ask Bernie, it says al-Bukhari. According to Muslim, al-Bukhari, sorry. And obviously some people who are not familiar with Muslim tradition and things like that, they might say, well, that's not in the actual Quran, that's not in the surahs. How do Muslims view the hadiths like al-Bukhari, Ali Muslim, are they they view them the same as the Quran?
Yeah, well, they would say that it's not the word of Allah in terms of it wasn't the words that were revealed directly to Muhammad that he spoke about, but they would also recognize that they've got a really important place. For example, the Quran doesn't tell you how many times to pray. The Quran says pray. It says pray in the morning, in the evening, and the night, but it doesn't tell you when to pray or how to pray. For that information, you need to go to the Hadith, and the Hadith will tell you, you pray 5 times, these are the times, this is how you pray. The Quran doesn't tell you how to fast. It doesn't give the details that you need, and you need to go to the Hadith to do that. The Quran, by the way, doesn't hold the full Shahada, the statement of faith that that Muslims would recite, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. It doesn't have that in one place. It's got the 2 bits there. You need to go to the Hadith to see that that's the statement that a person needs to make in order to become a Muslim. So without the Hadith, the Quran is a bit of a mystery. It's unclear what it teaches, and so Muslim scholars, when they want to know about the Quran, they would go to the Hadith, which has also got a commentary on the Quran and gives them all the details that are lacking in the Quran.
It almost sounds like how the Jews had Midrash and the Talmud. It almost sounds like that's the Arabic or the Muslim version of that. Would I be wrong in saying that?
No, exactly right. Yes, but the difference would be that the Tanakh, the Old Testament, has actually got a lot of the detail in it that the commentary is not necessarily needed. But the Quran actually needs the commentary in order to for people to know how to obey. In Muhammad's time, it was easy; they would just do what he did or go to him and ask him. But after he died, the only record of those things is in the Hadith, which is why people will go back to them now. So over this talk, I'm going to look at 10 aspects of Muhammad's life. Oh, heavens, that's an hour already. Boy. I'll talk about his moral character, his military history, treatment of enemies, involvement with slavery, treatment of children, treatment of women, treatment of the disabled, sayings on his deathbed, his final destiny, and his inability to save anyone. Just in terms of time, what time do you want us to finish up?
Oh, well, whenever you finish your presentation.
Okay.
So.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Sure. All right. Sorry, I took longer with that than I expected. I was.
Sorry, I'll probably won't interject with as many questions as
Yeah.
I'll let you do things.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So the first one is about Muhammad's moral character. So he never said that he was a perfect human being. Muhammad said, "I seek forgiveness from Allah 100 times a day." Anyone who says that is obviously aware of their shortcomings. In Al-Bukhari says, "I seek forgiveness 70 times a day." Notice everything I have here is referenced so that people can't say you're just making this up. And I've written these in my books, and I've also got a couple of pamphlets there I mentioned on the side. You can go onto my website, berniepower.com, and you can download these pamphlets for yourself. And we use these in our street outreach, and we give them to Muslims. In the Quran, 5 times, Allah tells Muhammad, "Seek forgiveness for your sin." And the Arabic there is "Staghfir li dhanbika." So it's your personal sin. And Muhammad said, "Allah, forgive me my sins that I did in the past or will do in the future, and the sins I did in secret or in public." So it was clear when Muhammad prayed this, he was obviously a prophet. There were still sins that he was expecting that he would commit in the future. He never claimed to be perfect, and he was quite open about his inability to defeat sin. He needed forgiveness for his sins, just like we all do. He was not a perfect model, therefore he could not be a perfect model for all of humanity. Secondly, Muhammad lived in violent times. As his troops attacked the village after village, they pillaged the wealth and they took gold and silver and camels as booty. And here's a list of the military campaigns. And again, I put these into a pamphlet called Muhammad the Warrior. And we go through and talk about the places where his followers killed, enslaved, or mistreated many of those who captured. In one town, a town called Khaybar, there was a Jewish man named Kanana bin Arabiya who was the keeper of the town's treasure. And it says Muhammad gave orders about him saying, "Torture him until you root out and extract what he has." And so Zubair, one of Muhammad's followers, kindled a fire on Kanana's chest and twirled it with his fire stick until Kanana was near death. And then Muhammad gave him to Maslama, whose brother had been killed in this campaign, and he beheaded Kinana. We also see that Muhammad then had sexual relations with Kinana's widow, Safiya, that evening, and he said, "I have been made victorious through terror." So there's details about Muhammad's military activities that are there in the earliest text. And I'll go through just a quick rundown of what that looked like from a historical perspective. This was the first year. He arrived in Medina in 622, and the following year, you see he goes and starts attacking the places around him. The following year, 624, a few more, and he's kind of expanding a little bit further to the north and to the east. But he's also got involved in assassinations, and you can see there on the right-hand side, there's a woman named Asma bint Marwan who criticized him, and then a man called Abu Afak, Ka'b bin al-Ashraf, and Abu Rafi. These were people who had criticized Muhammad, and so he sent death squads to take care of them. The next year, whoops, oh dear, that should be silent. The next year, can you hear me okay? Oops. Sorry, I'm having some problem here with my sound. Can you hear me okay, George?
Yeah, and I can also hear something else going on.
Right. Now can you still hear me?
Yep, good. Very good.
Now can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
All right. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I've got some other audio that's feeding in there. I'll have to make sure I get rid of that. So you can see these in the next year he goes for a couple more. The year after 627, again a few more. Oh, dear. Sorry, I'm getting some feed from the side, but I'll just skip past that. 628. The following year.
With that numbers on the left hand. So 630 AD was it? 12 delegations in Medina from different Arab tribes who would come. So 630 AD was a particularly violent year. 15.
So you've obviously got audio with this PowerPoint, which is playing.
Now extending its grasp. He's now pushing through different parts of the Arabian Peninsula, but also taking on other countries such as the people of Yemen, Ethiopia, and up towards the Roman area of the Byzantines.
And you can see this was the final year. So he's now been in Medina for 8 years, and he's starting to defeat these other places around him. And now he's expanding his military grasp, and you see invading other countries and moving up towards the Roman and the Persian areas up in the north, whereas the early ones were all local ones just in the towns and villages around Medina. Now as he's getting more military ability, and you can see the number of the armies are getting bigger, the one down in the bottom there, he takes an army of 30,000 men up to the north. That's about the size of the active Australian Defence Force currently. So with 25 million people, we've got an army of 30,000 men. Muhammad had the same with only a population of probably less than 1 million in the whole Arabian Peninsula at that time. So it was really quite significant. And the impact of this is that he starts to get, I'm just going to skip past here.
12 delegations in Medina from different Arab tribes who have come to make their commitment to Islam. You can see the locations of the tribes. They were from all different parts of the Arabian Peninsula.
Okay, so in this one, the effects of these military campaigns start to impact tribes from quite a fair distance away. So they then send delegations to Muhammad and say, please don't invade us. We will become Muslim. We will submit to you. And so this is how Islam grew. So these tribes, even some of them had never met Muhammad, were sending delegations and saying, we will become Muslim, but don't send your army in our way. In fact, we will join your army, which is how his army got bigger and bigger. His treatment of enemies wasn't always positive. He often treated them badly. And we saw Asma bint Marwan, the mother of 5 children. She had composed a poem against him, and he stands up in the mosque and says, who will rid me of Marwan's daughter? And one of his followers, Umayr bin al-Khatami, got up and said, I'll do it. And he went that night into her house while she was asleep. She had a baby she was breastfeeding, lying on her chest. He removed the baby and stabbed her to death. And then came back to Muhammad and reported this, and Muhammad said, you have helped Allah and his apostle. And Asma was just one of many who Muhammad ordered to be killed for opposing him. And on the right-hand side, you can see a list of the others that were executed by Muhammad's death squads. All of this is recorded in Islamic sources. It's not new information. It's been around for centuries. And again, I've produced a pamphlet which outlines all of these in the one called Muhammad the Warrior. Slavery was widely practiced amongst the Arabs, and the Quran taught that freeing slaves was a virtuous act. And he did free one of his slaves, Zayd bin Haritha, and actually adopted him as a son. Muhammad's had six children with Khadija when they were married. He had two sons, and the sons had both died, 2 or 3 sons, and they died as infants. And so he didn't have a male heir. So he adopts this slave, and he called him Zayd bin Muhammad, Zayd the son of Muhammad. But he'd set him free, and Zayd was going to inherit Muhammad's property after this. But after Muhammad became a prophet, he continued to acquire slaves, up to 40 of them. And we've got the list of their names there on the right-hand side. You can see them there. Again, all taken from Islamic sources. And he and his men captured many more. There were thousands of people that were enslaved because of Muhammad and his military campaigns. He also sold slaves to other people, and he ordered some of his female slaves to be flogged for various misdemeanors. So slavery was quite widely practiced in the Arabian Peninsula, and Muhammad also practiced it in himself. Child marriage was apparently accepted in Muhammad's time, and he practiced it. In Medina, he took Aisha, the daughter of his best friend, and the earliest sources, and I've got them there listed in the middle of that list, say that Muhammad married her when she was 6 years old and consummated the marriage when she was 9 years old. So this is a little girl who was primary school age, grade 2 or 3, and we're having the issue of a 54-year-old man, which is how old Muhammad was at that age, at that stage, having sexual relations with a 9-year-old girl. And people say this was a perfect model for humanity. And I'm saying I don't think that's true. Muhammad also married 10 other women, although some figures give a higher figure. Some Muslim scholars give a higher figure, some up to 20 other women. And he was involved in violence against women. One night it's reported that Aisha, this little girl who actually became his favorite wife, went outside the house without his permission. And she reported when she came back that he struck me on the chest, which caused me pain, or he poked me in the chest. He ordered other women to be killed. A man accused his wife of adultery to Muhammad, and Muhammad said, "Go and find the wife of this man, and if she confesses her guilt, stone her to death." And Unais, Muhammad's follower, went to the woman the next morning, and she confessed, and she was stoned to death. So there was violence against women in Muhammad's time on his commands and following his example. Although Muhammad could be brave in battle, at other times he lacked courage, and he also lacked compassion. He advised his followers to run away from a leper as one runs away from a lion. He married Asma bint Nu'man, a Kindite woman, and discovered on the wedding night that she was suffering from leprosy, so he divorced her. A more compassionate response would have been to keep the wedding promise. He'd promised that he would marry this woman, for better, for worse, in sickness and health, and to care for her in his household, because he already had 10 other wives, and he could have looked after her, but instead he sends her away. In the Quran, Muhammad's rebuked by Allah for frowning at and turning away a blind man, Abdullah ibn Maktoum, who came to Muhammad seeking spiritual guidance. But Muhammad at this time was talking to a wealthy and powerful man, and so he sends the blind man away. And Allah actually rebukes him in the Quran for lack of compassion to this disabled person. He didn't always show that. The 8th reason I'm giving for not believing that Muhammad is the perfect model for humanity is the thing that he did while on his deathbed. He was lying in the lap of his favorite wife, Aisha, and it says at the last moment of his life, Muhammad comes out with a curse. He says, "May Allah curse the Christians and the Jews, for they built the places of worship on the graves of their prophets." But this was just one instance of Muhammad actually cursing other people. And there are many others, and I've got the list of them here that they're in my book, Challenging Islamic Traditions. These are all taken from the Hadith. But this is a problem in that Abu Darda, one of Muhammad's followers, said, the messenger of Allah, that's Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, those who curse others will not be intercessors or witnesses on the day of resurrection. And we see that Muhammad actually cursed many people. We see dozens of them that he cursed during his lifetime. And he's saying these people will not be intercessors or witnesses on the day of resurrection. And the Muslim view is that when a person stands before Allah in judgment, other people can come and intercede for them or witness for them. But if they've cursed someone, they're not able to do that. And Muhammad disqualifies himself. There's also something else that Muhammad experienced on his deathbed, which raises questions about him. There's a verse in the Quran which says, if he, Muhammad, had forged a false saying concerning us, that is Allah, we surely would have seized him by his right hand, and we would have cut off his aorta, which is the blood vessel going to the heart, and none of you could have withheld us, that is Allah, from punishing him. So this is a threat that Allah makes if Muhammad had said something false about him. And this actually becomes a prophecy because this was fulfilled on Muhammad's deathbed. He's lying there on Aisha's chest, and he says, he used to say, "Oh Aisha, I feel the pain caused by the food I ate at Khaybar, and I feel as if my aorta is being cut off from that poison." So he's feeling that the thing that Allah prophesied about him was actually happening to him while he's lying there on his deathbed. And whether you accept that connection or not, Muhammad didn't know what was going to happen to him. He had no certainty of where he was going to end up. He said, "I don't know what will happen to me or to you." That's in the Quran. And he says, "By Allah, even though I am the apostle of Allah, I do not know what Allah will do to me nor to you." Another time he said, "The good deeds of any person will not make them enter paradise." And they said to him, "Not even you, O Allah's apostle." They thought, well, you're the best example for humanity. Surely your good deeds will make you enter paradise. And he said, "Not even myself, unless Allah bestows his favor and mercy upon me." And so we see at the end of his life, Muhammad, despite all his achievements and all the qualities, he was never certain that he would go to paradise. So it's not surprising then that he gave this advice to his followers, to his family and his friends. He said, "O people of the Quraysh," to his own tribe, "save yourselves from the hellfire, because I cannot save you from Allah's punishment. O Bani Abd Manaf," that's his own clan, "I cannot save you from Allah's punishment. O Safiya, the aunt of Allah's apostle," that's his own aunt, "I cannot save you from Allah's punishment. O Fatima bint Muhammad," his own daughter, he said, "ask me anything that you want from my wealth, but I cannot save you from Allah's punishment." And so he clearly sets out that he's not the one who will be able to intercede or mediate for people on the final day. He couldn't even save himself, so he wasn't able to save anyone else. And so to conclude, it should be obvious why I don't think Muhammad is the best model for humanity. He is conscious of his own sins and his shortcomings. He's quite open about those. If he thought that he was more obedient to God than anyone else, he was clearly lacking in discernment, and he would not be able to be a prophet on that basis. He might not have been the worst person who ever lived or walked on the earth, but based on his own sayings, based on his actions, based on the reports of his earliest and the best Islamic records that we have, Muhammad was clearly not the best person who has ever lived. And so that's why I chose not to follow Muhammad. So that's where I'll finish up and open up for any questions or comments that people have.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Bernie, for that presentation. It's amazing that what a little bit of research can do, because how many Muslims are there in the world today?
So about 1.6 billion.
1.6 billion. That's a lot of Muslims. That's a lot of. Would that be the second biggest in the world?
Yeah, Christianity would be counted as about 2.1 billion, so the biggest religion in the world, and Islam is the second biggest.
Well, that's well. Hopefully, the people that saw this presentation today, or that will see it later on, will take this information on board, whether you be a Muslim or a non-Muslim. And maybe we can, like, a lot of us like to be aggressive, or this and that. I think sometimes taking the humble approach, taking the least how can I say, the least offensive way of presenting it, hopefully our Muslim brothers and sisters could take heed. So if there's any comments or any questions before we finish up today, please do it now. And well, we got Jasmine, mother-in-law, saying blessings, family. But yeah, we'll be on maybe for another minute or so, 2 minutes. If you can put your comments up or your questions before we finish off today. And while we're waiting for that, is there any words of encouragement or any advice that you can give to people who are trying to evangelize to their Muslim brothers and sisters?
Yeah. So I encourage people, they can use this material and say to a person, have a look at this. You can go and check all the references yourself and see if it's true. And I deliberately I try to be gracious about this. I think if you've got the truth, you don't need to shout. You don't need to be offensive to people. You can simply put it out there and people can choose whether or not they're going to accept it, or they can attempt to refute it, which is why I do these public debates with Muslims, so that we can respond in an appropriate manner from an academic, historical, from a textual perspective.
No, for sure. And I do appreciate you taking the time out to come and speak to us, and not just that, just the 40 years of sacrifice that you've given to the body of Christ. I know I definitely appreciate it. I've been an admirer of your work for a few years now, and it's a blessing for me to get to know you a bit lately, and to even have you on our platform, sharing this information. We'll continue to support you, continue to pray for your family, and for those that want the material, make sure you check out his website, buy the books. I'll be placing some orders this weekend, and yeah, hopefully we'll have you back on, dealing with some Islamic topics, and maybe even some other things, if you'd be happy to come and join us.
Yep, sure, happy to do that. Yep, no problem.
Thank you so much. So we're going to end this broadcast here. Not bad timing. It's an hour and 17 minutes, so it's not too bad. But we thank you, Dr. Bernie. We'll see you soon. Before you go, where can people reach you?
Yeah. So if they can write an email to me. So bpower. I'll write it up on the thing here again. It's in my pen. Oops, there it is. So bpower@mst.edu.au. So.
There we got it. We got your website scrolling down the bottom of the screen too.
All right.
BerniePower.com.
So mst.edu.au. Yep. So sorry, excuse my scroll. So bpower@mst.edu.au. You can send me an email, and if you want any information, any of the materials, I'm happy to pass those on to people.
Here we go. It says we got a couple more comments here. It says, "Thank you, sir, for another informative presentation. I respect your very humble approach. What 3 verses in the Quran that every Christian should know?"
Yeah. Okay. Good question. That's a hard one. I would probably go to let me see. So 345. I would probably go to chapter 3, and I can't do it in 3 verses, but maybe in 10 verses or so, from verses 45 up to 55. So Surah chapter 3, verses 45 to 55. When people say to me, oh, so you've read the Quran, what did you think of it? I say, oh, look, it told me some very interesting things about Jesus. And if you read through those verses, you can find, it says 10 things, I've got a thing there called What the Quran Says About Jesus. And it talks about the fact that he was born of a virgin, that he was the one who created. The word in Arabic, he says he created from dirt a bird and brought it to life. He gave sight to the blind. He healed the sick. And that he has now risen and he's beside Allah. And he's highly exalted in this world and in the next. He also is the one who has hidden knowledge. So I'd say these are the things that the Quran teaches me about Jesus, which actually are very similar to the things that I find in the Bible. And then I would go to the Bible and just talk about that. So that would be a good kind of a response to some verses that, so 10 verses there that would be really helpful. Chapter 3, verses 45 to 55.
I like that. I like how you instead of getting into like the debate about why the Quran is faulty or whatever, how you're showing the gospel, leading it back to Jesus Christ. That's a definitely reflection of your character. Probably if it was me, I'd probably be going to see what the Quran says about not being friends with Christians or Jews. The more the combative approach. Well, that's awesome, Dr. Bernie, for that. Another comment here. Thank you, Dr. Bernie Power. I will definitely be looking over the information you gracefully have shared with us. God bless you. God bless you. And Jasmine says, thank you. Great presentation. Make sure you check out his debates. His debates are awesome. I love the one where you brought out the red herring cans. Who was that again? You debated?
That was Adnan Rashid. Yeah, so he brought up a whole lot of things. In fact, the topic was who is Muhammad, and he kept talking about everything except Muhammad. So I listed them all on a whole lot of red herring cans and said these are not related to the topic. They're not what we're talking about today.
Maybe we could do a stream on how to deal with the Islamic arguments. Maybe that could be a presentation we could do in the future if you'd be willing to join us again, because
that would be great. I'd like that. Yeah, I do a lot of work on that.
Awesome. Well, God bless you, Bernie Power. Stay safe in this time of Corona, because I look forward to hopefully having you coming in person, and more like having some fellowship and a cup of tea and some biscuits and just chatting about your years in the Middle East. That'll be awesome to talk about. But you have a good day, sir, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Look forward to that. God bless you.
God bless. Yes, so hey family, we'll be back on tomorrow with a sermon, the Sunday service with Pastor Fato from Just Jesus Ministries Brisbane. So be tuned in for that. We're going to have numerous guests coming in and sharing the word on Sunday. I know we've been dealing with a lot of information, debunking certain cults and whatnot, which we still will be doing, and I'll be giving my 2 cents on that. But as far as the sermons are concerned, we're going to be having some good inspirational spiritual speakers come on and share the word of God. So, you guys, thanks for joining in this week. We'll see you hopefully tomorrow. Have a good rest of the afternoon, and God bless.